There's a lot going on in the world of education at all times. There's a lot of screaming, there's a lot of crying. Usually, there are some undercover and behind the door shenanigans because, as a former teacher, I can tell you that when the door shuts, things change. And one group that's been dedicated to making sure that parents have complete and full access to absolutely everything that's going on in a school, whether legal or not, is Accuracy in Media. You may know them from their brilliant exposés in Indiana and Texas, which showcased administrators that admitting to using things like critical race theory and diversity, equity, and inclusion inside of the classroom once the door shut, although they were telling parents something completely different. Well, things changed in Texas a little bit after the Texas state government passed a law banning diversity, equity, and inclusion programs from universities. But as Adam Guillette, the president of Accuracy in Media, is here this evening to tell us, things may not be so simple. Adam, good evening.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So I was shocked to see the email, mainly because I'm not really sure how you guys find time to sleep over at AIM. Why don't you tell us what's going on this time in Texas?
Sure. Well, as you know, we've been in literally hundreds of K through 12 school districts across the country, primarily in states where they banned the teaching of the principles associated with critical race theory. And now that a number of states have prohibited DEI and critical race theory in higher education, we decided to take our cameras to those universities to find out if they were actually adhering to the law. Well, good thing we're sitting down. Not surprisingly, a half dozen universities in Texas, funded by our tax dollars, had administrators that bragged to us about how they ignore the law.
Wow, I for one am shocked. I am bamboozled, smeckledorfed. I can't believe it. I mean, you're telling me that the schools that staffed their entire universities with far left leaning individuals who passionately believe in DEI are ignoring the law to teach DEI? Say it ain't so.
You know what? There was one shock because unlike what we see in K through 12, in K through 12, anytime we get past a gatekeeper, pretty much every time they tell us that they're ignoring the law. Texas was different in higher education because a number of universities really did suggest to us that they are adhering to the law and they're pretty bitter about it. You know, one employee bemoaned that he essentially got a demotion because of the new law. But of course, those were the minority. The majority of the districts we met with said, oh, we're just changing the title and doing the same stuff. We don't let the politicians tell us what to do, which means, of course, they don't let the law tell them what to do. They make their own law in higher education.
And again, it's not just universities that are paying their own way, like expressly private institutions. These are a lot of institutions that are receiving money from the state of Texas that are kind of flirting around breaking Texas law. I'll tell you though, what are some of the ways that they're changing the title? It's been a few years since I was in the game of changing the titles as an administrator in a public school. How are these Texas universities changing? Like, what's the next new name for the DEI office?
You know, just like in K through 12, it kind of varies. In K through 12, they would say instead of critical race theory, we now just call it equity, or then we call it social and emotional learning. One district in rural Tennessee told us that they just call it mental health. Who's against mental health? Well, in higher ed, it was the same thing. One university said, well, we just call it the Department of Belonging now. And other universities came up with their own benign terms. Belonging. That's right, belonging.
Wait. I'm sorry, that's so stupid. Oh, we're on with Adam Guillette from Accuracy in Media. I wasn't expecting it. I'm the Department of Belonging. First of all,
the Department of Belonging.
Very Orwellian.
I was just going to say, I imagine if a conservative went in there feeling like they don't necessarily feel like they belong on campus, they'd be laughed right out of the room. But that's how it is. Again, so whenever they try to tell us that, oh, who's against diversity, equity, and inclusion, we can very strongly say you don't mean any of those words, diversity, equity, or inclusion. And we know that because you abandon them so quickly and pick up new terms. And then you abandon those terms and pick up other terms. It is clear that when you look at the dictionary or the thesaurus, you view it as a list of options rather than a list of potential descriptions for the work that you're doing.
And I will point out that at places like Arizona State University, back when they had these multicultural spaces that were endorsed by the DEI office, that as soon as two white students showed up, all hell broke loose. It was the worst thing that had ever happened since the bubonic plague. And all of a sudden, these offices of, again, belonging, goodness, aren't exactly interested in making students feel like they belong. Well, that can't be the end. I'm sure you found more shenanigans. Give us more details, man. I'm curious. What else did you find?
Well, in one university, they told us about how they had a transition closet. I don't know if that's part of a ritual or a ceremony or something related to the woke religion, but they had a transition closet, which was part of their DEI department. And they were essentially to adhere to obey the law. They had to get rid of it, but they just rebranded the transition closet and called it something like an all gender closet. Again, this sounds like silly stuff that you'd be doing in kindergarten, but this is literally what is happening at public universities in Texas. This isn't Boulder. This isn't Berkeley. This is Texas Tech, A&M, University of like North Dallas, and colleges like that.
Wow.
These aren't what we would think of as radically left universities, yet this is what they're doing. So with that in mind, what do you think they're doing at Berkeley and at Boulder? My gosh.
I know this is one of the things that there's a situation in Indiana right now where there's a law in the books that would basically require the Indiana state legislature to, or not require, it would give them the authority to appoint members of the Board of Education, which every state legislature should have the authority to appoint board of trustee members in publicly funded universities. And people are losing their minds. And one of the comments I've seen is, well, don't you trust us? Don't you trust us to have a great college and a great university? And then I see stories like yours and investigations like yours. You don't just, I'm a kind of guy who I go and I do an investigation on one school. You guys are marathon team runners, man. You guys go to every single university in a region and you knock on all of the doors. Your undercover investigations, just to be fully transparent with the audience here, leave me astounded. I don't know how you get into these situations. It's one thing to say, well, I was in this meeting and they told me this, but you guys have the footage of people that are bragging about avoiding the law so directly. So tell me, what needs to happen now? The investigation's open, everything's out in the air. It's going to stir up the Texas legislators, I'm sure, like a nest of hornets. What comes next?
Honestly, for me, I think we need major reshaping of how we view public education and higher education in America. For K through 12 education, first of all, ban DEI there. If you don't think DEI should exist in higher education, why the heck is it in kindergarten? And that's what I want to see a lot of these elected officials do in red states. Ban DEI in K through 12 if you've got it banned in higher education. Now, guaranteed we'll go in after the fact and find out that half of them are ignoring the law. Fine, then add teeth to the laws. Most importantly, add universal school choice. Texas, this big red Republican state, has less school choice than California and New York. Texas, again, I'm going to repeat that, has less school choice than California and New York. They deserve universal school choice. Ohio has it. North Carolina is moving towards it. Indiana is moving towards it. Utah, so many states now, Arizona, Florida, enacted universal school choice. Why doesn't it exist in Texas? For higher ed, we need to see major funding cuts and major reshaping of how we view public education in the higher education space in America. Why are we taking tax dollars from people by force to fund degrees that are nothing but radical ideology and will never help anyone get a job, and instead will saddle them with massive debt? I mean, the honest answer, of course, is these universities don't exist to educate anyone any more so than K through 12 does. These largely exist to funnel tax dollars into the hands of left-wing politicians.
And that's really the sad truth that we have to come to grips with, that these institutions, which once stood for providing academic training to be beneficial to United States society and its economy, have now created basically these goofy temples of individuals to find themselves. And of course, by finding themselves, it's really actually finding a bunch of leftist dogma on the taxpayer's dime. Adam Guillette from Accuracy in Media, thank you so much for hopping on with us and sharing a little bit about this recent investigation.
Hey, thank you for having me.